So welcome back to the Automation Generation, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about a different document type that we spend some time looking at. So a lot of what we do is around intelligent document processing. A lot of the podcasts up until this date have had a leaning towards invoice processing, and today I'm going to talk a little bit more about sales order processing. I'm joined by Josh, our head of technology again. If you could just give us a quick introduction again, Josh, please, that'd be great.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm Josh, head of technology at Spectrum. I've been with the organisation for probably about 11 years now, working from delivering solutions to our customers, now in a position where I'm looking after our automation teams, our technical teams who deliver the solutions to our customers, making sure they've got the right technologies and support, but also making sure I've got one eye forward in the market to make sure we're not losing track of where technology is going. It moves so fast, it moves so quickly. We want to make sure that we're at the forefront of that technology, bringing it into business and business automation, and not just delivering the same solutions kind of on a repeated basis, really.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there was, I think it was the first podcast that I did with JV. We were kind of talking high level about kind of the discovery process, and naturally kind of the conversation flowed into some of the problems that we see accounts payable departments having when processing invoices. And one of the things that I'm keen to get across to our listeners and the people that watch us is that we're not a kind of a one-trick pony, as it were. And so, yeah, we absolutely work with all sorts of transactional documents. But one of the biggest kind of growth areas for us that I see at the moment is not in the accounts payable team. It's in the sales team, or the sales order processing team. So the sales ledger versus the purchase ledger sort of thing. And I know we've been delivering sales order processing solutions for a while now, but it just seems to be picking up some speed in terms of that's what clients kind of come to us and talk to us about. So just like the accounts payable team has got problems processing invoices, the sales admin teams or the sales teams have problems processing incoming sales orders. The challenges tend to be that I see tend to be a bit different. We still got the whole idea of using data sets of information to recognise data from an order. There tends to be a bit quicker of a turnaround on an order for me. So whereas an invoice, you're probably going to have kind of query handling that might take days or even weeks. Yep. Orders really need to go in the system straight away. What are the kind of differences have you seen between invoice processing and sales order processing, do you think?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that we look at in that process, and you touched on it there about it almost being a bit more reactive on the sales side, is you've got to get that feeling back out to who is your customer of, yeah, we received your order, yes, we've processed it, yes, we've got the stock, or no, we don't. Whereas accounts payable, there's a bit more freedom because you've usually got a 14 to 30 day kind of payment terms there. You can pass that around the business with a bit more time. But ultimately, the sales order processing side, it's that initial channel of information coming in that's probably the biggest change when you look at one process to the other. Accounts payable, you're looking at usually paper documents and quite standard formats of documents more often than not as part of that process, whereas the sales side, it really varies. It could be a relatively standard document, that purchase order request that comes through from the customer itself for those goods. It could be just a handwritten email. It could be some expectation that there's a portal there and maybe some more kind of live chat. It could be the salesperson's come in from some kind of account review or whatever it might be, depending on the type of business, with an order to raise that's a bit more kind of free and fluid, I guess, from that point of view. So for sales order processing, it's very much a different start of the process, and it's looking at that and understanding what's the key area to focus on for automation there. Because there are technologies out there that you could start with. Any of those, we could offer portals, and we do look at portals with one of our strategic partners around sales order processing. But there's also the document side. There's also that free text side, and with things like ChatGPT and modern large language models, can we do things with those that might then help that processing, even if it's just 20, 30, 40% of reduction in processing time there to automate the taking of that information and turning it into an order. There's also a lot more bespoke rules that come into sales order processing. Accounts payable, it's very much a rigid process to approve. We know who's going to go there. But sales, because ultimately it's the nature of your business coming in. You want to be flexible with your customers. You want to make sure you're offering the best service, the best pricing. There's often more of a different price books, tiered pricing, exceptions, gold level customers that might have different standards, delivery locations and terms, lots of rules that come into play in sales order process that make it quite complex. But if you can automate those rules, again, you're just turning around order after order and a customer's almost getting a instantaneous response back there on feedback rather than it being a queue of service agents taking hours of time processing orders, even to just say, yeah, sorry, we don't have the stock for that. And as a customer at the other end of the phone or other end of the email, having a delay of days in some instances to find out they've not actually got the stock, well, that's a real kick in the teeth. So if we can take that and give a faster turnaround, that's a huge return for the customer experience, not just for the experience internally there as well.
So we've managed to get all the way through 5 episodes without talking about Chat GPT and large language models, but it had to happen at some point, didn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. That's definitely one of the things I see pre-sales is that when we go out to talk to people, they've got lots of different channels for orders coming through. You've got that idea of having a semi-structured document, and we touched on kind of semi-structured PDF type documents on invoices with JV previously, and an order follows some of the same rules as an invoice does. That's one of the things that we talked about was the fact that, when you're looking at templated versus templateless solutions, then the templateless solutions understand that semi-structure of a document, that it's got a header, that it's got a table of items, that it might have some information in the footer. And an order is very similar, isn't it, to an invoice, and the fact that you'll have that delivery address in the top of the order, probably you'll have that order number, that order date. You'll have that table of items that the customer's wanting to place on order with you, and then possibly some footer information down there as well. So very similar approach, I suppose, in our automation tool set to capturing incoming sales orders that it would be for invoices. And it's interesting that you mentioned then those completely unstructured documents in the form of an email, because that's something that we've not really covered on the podcast yet. And there's lots of bits of our tool set that can be used to look at unstructured data, but we're obviously always looking for new tools to be able to assist with that. And I think you were doing some kind of proof of concept in recently, weren't you, with using large language models from turning a kind of handwritten email, as it were, into a tabular set of data, that's structured data that can then be used to create an order.
Absolutely, and the technology advancement there in helping humans in the day-to-day role just through natural language is really starting to excel, and the number of applications in business is growing alongside the technology growth as well. So just being, and I mentioned it earlier around that automation rate, that technology is getting better and better, and it's becoming, quite frankly, scary, but it's not at the point where it's going to remove a human in the process. But what it can do is take that input and it can help reduce the effort and almost give a human an indicator to say, can you double check this, rather than just fully automating that process. So if we can take almost a shopping list, and I did see this while doing the proof of concept from one of our customers, an email that came in that was 60-70 lines from a chef with a shopping list of 2 onions and 4 cloves of garlic or whatever it might be, and taking that really unstructured email and turning it into a very structured table form of measures, prices, quantities, product descriptions, etc. And then being able to do something systematically with that is a huge advancement, even if it does need that human in the loop still to verify that information.
Yeah, it's all about making it more efficient for the humans to get involved, isn't it? At that point, yes, it might not do a job of getting every single part of that email written up into a perfect table, so it can go kind of straight through processing without any human intervention. But if it makes more sense of it, it's got to be easier to read a table of items than it has to read the content of a paragraph that somebody's kind of typed in, or a big long list like that, hasn't it?
100%. And it's even to the point where we maybe don't see this as humans in day to day. If I go back to that scenario for the shopping list. I want 2 garlic. Okay, well, what garlic is that? Is that garlic puree, garlic cloves? Is that roasted garlic? What kind of garlic is that? And there's always going to need to be the human intervention there until we can build in the system rules to understand, okay, based on this buying history for this particular customer, when they say garlic, it means this type of garlic or whatever it might be, to kind of aid the system. But ultimately keying in 70 lines of order information is going to be a significant amount of time, and just doing that up front is a huge time saving, even if it's not, like you said, straight through processing.
Yeah, okay, great. So I think it's probably fair to say that we're more focused on those semi-structured kind of attached like PDF documents that have obviously somebody from the purchasing team has typed that into their ERP system or their ordering system, and that's generated that document back to say this is what we want to order, as it were. So yeah, going back to that, so we've got the same kind of approach in terms of data sets as well, haven't we? So it's important to have data sets of information. There's less on the page that we're likely to know up front because, there's not going to be, with an invoice, you might have a corresponding order, you might have a corresponding receipt. We're not going to be able to predict what the customer's asking for. But we might be able to predict these are their delivery locations that they've given us previously. So using that idea of master data to find the delivery locations. What other kind of master data do we use within the sales order processes, or anything else to do with the products, the table of items, or anything else like that?
Yeah, so a bit of a combination, really. And we see some of these complexities in accounts payable as well as the order side. But you mentioned there customer delivery addresses. You're going to have ultimately the products that we're matching to, but you're also probably going to have different variants of those products as well. So, for example, if it's cans of Coca-Cola, you might come in 6 packs, 18 packs, whatever it might be. So using that information that exists in your product catalog as well to understand, well, are they ordering that size of that product or that color of that product? If it's cleaning gloves, as an example, it's really important to supplement that as well as part of that matching criteria. So that's really important, and getting that data up front, as I'm sure you probably mentioned in one of the previous podcasts on AP, getting that data up front as clean as possible, as populated as possible with all those different types of information. It's really important to get that straight through processing rate. But as you mentioned there, with sales orders, it's not an expected document. It's not a company in order that you've created. So there may need to be, with these automation solutions, a period of time where you're supplementing that. And whether we build that into the solutions to learn the relationship between your product code and the customer's product code, or product descriptions and product codes, whatever it might be, there's a bit element of retaining that information and gaining that knowledge within the solution that then gives you that straight through processing later on down the line. Whereas accounts payable, often you can start off quite early in the process of matching that to orders quite reliably, and not necessarily having to build that up, albeit there might still need to be a process of populating supplier information that wasn't there previously.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the things that I talk about pre-sales is this whole idea of matching product codes. And, you'll find a lot of ERP systems are able to collate that information. So, this is the product code that we stock our items in. This is what my customer uses. And if I see one or the other, I can translate it backwards and forwards between those two. But often, that information doesn't exist at this point, and it's somebody kind of handballing the orders and knowing intuitively when they see that particular product code from their customer, this is what they mean, or this is what they ordered previously, so I know this is likely to be what pack size they want to order in the future, sort of thing. And it's having that knowledge locked in people's head that can be a bit of a challenge, can't it? It's difficult to make that kind of computer to be able to work in that way, but using data sets and cross-referencing information can help along the way, and certainly once you've got that systemized, there's a lot less risk than having it stuck in somebody's head, as it were, and only having experience being able to dictate how these orders are processed.
Yeah. Plus, there's the ability there to use that data to help inform the user on things that they might not have spotted previously. If it's a pricing discrepancy, for example, if we're looking at a product that's always been purchased regularly at a particular price, but then all of a sudden that product gets ordered at a different price, well, should we be accepting that in the system automatically just because the part number matches? Should we be allowing that and not flagging it up and saying, well, maybe they've raised it internally as the same part code, but maybe they now mean the 18 pack because it's the price of the 18 pack rather than the price of the 6 pack or whatever it might be. So building in those checking processes that into the solution is really important as well, not just capturing that information but highlighting some of those things that could easily be missed by a human eye as part of that processing.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that customers tell me about sales order processing is things like delivery charges as well, isn't it? I think you mentioned it earlier on, but if the delivery address is suggesting that delivery area is out of area, and there might need to be additional charges put onto it, that's one less thing that somebody needs to keep an eye on and be thinking about, isn't it? Yeah, so if you can pass that information to the ERP system in the file and say, this needs an additional charge because it's out of area, that's only going to help speed that process up.
100%. And we see things like that, delivery charges, small delivery charges. If there's a particular order point where the customer needs to reach to have delivery knocked off or to skip the small delivery charge. I mentioned about golden customers. There's this concept in some industries about ABC customers where, they have different price lists or preferential rates or processing times or whatever it might be, and building those logic rules into the system so that, again, the user is focused about matching the discrepancies and not dealing with core business logic of this is how we charge our customers or this is how we make sure the processing happens. Just removes that potential for error or lost revenue in some instances because we're not charging carriage or we're charging the wrong amount of carriage, and all of a sudden now we're stuck with £100 bill of sticking it over to the Cayman Islands or whatever it might be, or the British Isles instead of down the road, and we can send one of the van drivers to do it instead.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was talking to a customer the other day that was kind of loosely doing some manufacturing, but they were buying kind of adhesives and things in, and then and kind of manufacturing them into other products for their customers. And one of the challenges that they had was that sometimes that delay between receiving an order and actually getting it into the manufacturing process might mean that they're at risk of not meeting expected delivery dates. They work, their customers quite often tell them we must have this product in our hands by this particular date, and so and because they've got quite complex orders, and because somebody needs to have a look at what materials are required and then schedule it into the manufacturing process and all those sorts of things, by the time it's got through that process, or at least it's got some visibility of that, then they might not be able to actually meet the delivery date. I think that's one of the other really important things. That doesn't just risk that particular order being lost, it also means that potentially in the future that customer might not be a return customer. So speed of delivery of those orders, or at least order acknowledgements, is going to be really, really important, isn't it?
100%. I mentioned it earlier in terms of that expected feedback. If you're there as a buyer wanting to order a particular set, and if it's a factory scenario like that and you need it at a particular point, getting that response of we can't deliver that at that point is really important, because it's the difference between getting a response at 5:30 and therefore not getting the delivery because you no longer got time to phone supplier B to try and get the products, and therefore the factory's at a stop, all because of the way that order was processed. So if you can even just improve the customer experience, and I mentioned that earlier about the difference between that internal employee experience and the customer experience, accounts payable, it's really all about improving the experience for your staff. Processing invoices isn't a fun thing to do. It's quite a boring task, taking information off paper, and any process like that is not particularly interesting for users. Whereas for the other side, on the sales side, it's very much more about the sales experience as well as the employee experience, but making sure that you're keeping your customers happy, engaged. You're maybe inviting more instances there to bring other things in. Again, we could automate things like automatic discounts or free products for samples in that process to entice customers coming in if it's automated, which again could get missed if it's an internal thing. Upsell opportunities, that kind of thing as well. Trying to just build that relationship with the customer rather than just be there as processing whatever they ask for.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've noticed as well is that they tend to be more simple than AP in some respects, then more complex than AP in other respects.
Yeah.
So the actual workflow in the background tends to involve less people. So whereas with an AP solution and an invoice, you might have the purchasing department getting involved with feeding back on a pricing query. You might have the goods in team involved with feeding back on a receipt issue. Yeah. You've obviously got the AP team involved. So it's very kind of cross-divisional and cross-departmental, isn't it? Whereas with sales order processing, it tends to be kind of the sales admin team that whoever that might have to hold that role gets involved with kind of the workflow, as it were. So the workflow tends to be simpler from an engaging with a user point of view, but maybe a bit more complex around adding those things in, like small delivery charges and minimum order quantities. There's more business rules in the background in some respects, isn't there, to automate? But yeah, the people involved are a smaller set of people.
Absolutely. And I guess that all depends on that business process. And when we come in, we can understand that business process to make sure we've got it in the right way. If you've got back-to-back deliveries configured in your ERP system, there's maybe not a need in the workflow process to pass it off to the goods in team to understand, or the warehousing team to understand whether there's stock there. Again, if that's automated already in your process, it simplifies that. But again, we can always tailor the solution to handle those scenarios where if stock quantities are lower than a certain threshold or don't meet the requirements of delivery, is there a an edge case there where we pass that out to a different team to review first. Can we get our own internal buyers bringing that product in fast enough to bring that back out again for the customer, or do we need to reject that order as well?
Okay, well, makes a good level of sense. And and then the process is exactly the same for us, isn't it? In terms of discovery, tailored demonstration, all the things that we talked about in terms of statement of works creation, user stories, process mapping. It's all relevant, isn't it? Regardless of whether the transactional document's an invoice or whether it's an order.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll always tackle every solution with exactly the same process. And I don't know whether it's something we've discussed in previous podcasts at this point, but the technologies that we use are also, very flexible to tackle whatever it is we might need to tackle, whether it's intelligent document processing and picking up contracts versus invoices versus passports or whatever it might be, versus the workflow automating any business process, electronic forms, digitizing any piece of paper. We're not stuck in a very rigid process of we can only automate these things, but we need to stay flexible enough that we can gather requirements for all these different types of processes as well. And we've got a really good way of handling that regardless of the process or document or people involved as well.
Yeah, so important note there really are products are platform products that can be used for lots of different processes. So once you've bought it to do one thing, once you've got it up and running, once it's working, then it's then looking at what the next opportunity for. Is it in the sales against the sales ledger? Is it statement reconciliation? Is it remittances? Just to get that maximum value from those products that you've already bought into.
Absolutely, you've already got that in the business. You've already brought that change into the business. And often what we find, this might be capture, it might be workflow, it might be business intelligence. When people start to get sight of the automation that's brought in, people start thinking, well, why can't I have that in my department? Again, whether it's HR, sales, finance, logistics, bringing that out and growing it into the business is just going to help that onboarding of change and that automation rate across the industries as well, by really starting to expose the potential of these products and grow that for the business. And it's not, then isn't a point of we're bringing in a product that does this thing and a product that does this thing. These really can grow and take on any automation opportunity in the business.
So brilliant! Thanks, Josh. I think we're probably getting towards the end of our podcast on sales order processing for now. So I appreciate you coming and joining me today. I hope for people that have been watching that gives a bit of insight into some of the other solutions we have other than just invoice processing. There are lots of other things that we do around other transactional documents and other transactional processes. It doesn't have to be a document-centric process for us to get involved. And I'm sure we'll cover some more of those in the future, and look out for Josh coming back to the podcast in the very near future. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.